Welcome to Domain Name System Abuse, Defined and Experienced. Today we're going to be discussing the definition of domain name system abuse, and our panelists will share their experiences with these issues. Our discussion is going to be guided by hypothetical situations, loosely based on experiences we've faced in our daily work, but firmly grounded in the reality of the exploitation of consumers and brands that's happening online. To give you an introduction to our panelists, we have to my right Tara Harris, the group IP lead at Prosus, where Tara spearheads the group's IP strategy, manages IP risk, and in terms of IP, too many acronyms here, intellectual property risks, and protects and enforces intellectual property assets across the globe, including managing the group's online brand protection program. And Prosus is part of Naspers, a South African multinational global consumer internet group, and one of the largest technology investors in the world. Next to Tara, we have Daniel Zani, who is, I'm skipping ahead, the global head of online brand protection at Avian. He's a highly experienced intellectual property lawyer with bar qualifications in Germany and the United States, who spent over 10 years at FIFA, where he led the intellectual property team and the online brand protection for the World Cup tournaments. Right now, Daniel is a partner at Avian, and he leads the Switzerland office, serving as global head of online brand protection there. And online, I think we have Dr. Sama Salem, somewhere maybe, hopefully, the Executive Director of Emerging Technology and Security at the Egyptian Computer Emergency Response Team, and a Professor of Cybersecurity at the Faculty of Engineering at Helwan University in Egypt. And Dr. Sami is passionate about fostering innovation while ensuring digital safety. I'm Alexis Crawford Douglas, a partner at the global law firm of K&L Gates, where my intellectual property practice includes helping clients combat cyber squatting, online infringement, and the domain name system abuse that we're going to be talking about today. So I have firsthand experience with these issues, as do all of our panelists. But the reason that we're here outside of our daily jobs is that three of us on this panel, myself, Tara, and Daniel, are all members of the International Trademark Association, which is an association of brand owners and professionals dedicated to supporting trademarks and complementary intellectual property. And one of our missions as part of that organization is to identify trends and practices online that impact intellectual property holders and ultimately really everyday consumers. It's not just about brands and making money, it's about the people at the end of those experiences. And that's a lot of what we're going to talk about today. And to this end, INTA put together a definition of domain name system abuse that seeks to hold registrars, registry operators, and registrants all accountable for a wider range of harmful activity that's making it, and also to make it easier for companies, governments, and consumers to stop this activity online. So we have, some of the objectives here for this program. And we'll go through the definitions very quickly, not to bore you, not to put you to sleep, but I think it's important to talk through these definitions and show why it's not enough and how the examples that we're going to speak about really touch on why there needs to be more protection and policies in place. The slide clicker is not working. Can you just go to the next slide for me? The next one. Two more after that. I just kept talking through the slides, so. Keep going. Go ahead. This one right here. You could stop. Go back. One more. Thanks. All right. So some of the common definitions of DNS abuse are, one of them is the EU Commission study that DNS abuse, domain name system abuse, is any activity that makes use of domain names or DNS protocol to carry out harmful or illegal activity, which can be a wide scope of activities, right? In contrast, ICANN and the new registry agreement that was amended this past summer narrowly defines DNS abuse as malware, botnets, phishing, farming, and spam, but when spam serves as a delivery mechanism for other forms of DNS abuse. These are very highly technical definitions and narrow definitions of what constitutes DNS abuse, and we'll talk today about a broader definition. The other two, ICANN's business constituency gave a somewhat broader definition that also included trademark or copyright infringement, fraudulent or deceptive practices, counterfeiting, or otherwise engaging in activity contrary to applicable law. We're going to take that and narrow it a little bit more because that's broad, but I think if you can flip to the next slide, please. INTA adopted a board resolution in 2023 to give a definition of domain name system abuse that is simpler and I think easier to understand, but also broad. It's any activity that makes or intends to make use of domain names for the domain name system protocol or any digital identifiers that are similar or in form or function to domain names, because now everything is included, to carry out deceptive, malicious, or illegal activity. And these three types of activity is what we're going to talk about today in our examples. Bad behavior online, to put it simply. So why do we care about these definitions? There's a lot of harmful behavior that's happening online right now affecting the general public, and there are not mechanisms for stopping it, easy mechanisms for stopping it. I'm going to kick it over to Daniel to talk about where we started with domain name systems abuse and kind of where we are now.
Okay, thank you. So kind of old school domain name system abuse. Probably a lot of you have heard the term of cyber squatting. In essence, registering a domain name that is linked to a brand where you're the first one to do it, right? So you're earlier than the brand could register it. Let's say it's a .com, and as an example, you have the .com, but then in a different TLD, the brand is registered by somebody else, normally with the goal to sell it back to the brand. Now, one could easily argue and say, well, what's wrong about that, right? I'm just using the system. That's what the system is. I am leveraging that fact, supply and demand. Of course, brands, on the other hand, that have trademarks, invested a lot of their brands in the good faith, might disagree. And if that was done for that specific purpose, so in bad faith, registering a domain, there are mechanisms like the UDRP to get the domain back by the brand owner. An example for this is, for example, out of my practice when I was at FIFA. FIFA started to do a lot in the gaming world, in the esports world, and in the esports world, a typical TLD that is used is .gg, which is the Channel Islands, Guernsey, and Jersey. Now, .gg also stands for good game. It's a term that's used by gamers as, repping each other up. So somebody had registered FIFA.gg. Now, the FIFA esports team wanted to use that domain for their website, etc. It was gone, and it was offered actually to one of the FIFA partners, EA Sports at the time. Yeah, don't you want to buy this, etc. Then there was an exchange, and the person that owned the domain, which was also not clear who it was, of course, because due to privacy, it was not obvious, then said, well, we did some valuations, and for $17 million, you can have this. Yeah, that was not really what the company thought the value was, and clearly higher than any out-of-pocket expense that the person ever paid. So, a administrative procedure was started, an arbitration before the GG Arbitrary Commission. It's actually one person in Guernsey that administers it. And in the end, after the decision that was rendered, the domain was signed over to FIFA. Now, that is really not what we're typically talking about today anymore when it's about domain name abuse. These are things, sometimes I think some brand owners may even say of the past, because some brands don't even really care about domain names that much anymore. A lot of people just go and search, right? Like, who plugs in a domain name? Often that doesn't happen that much anymore. So brands are now more faced with situations where domain names that contain their brands are used for fraudulent activity, for scams, etc., that in essence don't only affect them, but much more affect the consumers. But for consumers, it's often very hard to go after something like that. If you've been scammed online and you go to your local police station, well, mostly good luck with that. You know, either they throw up their hands, they're like, I don't know what to do with this, or you file the report and it goes nowhere. But brand owners are in a position often to leverage their brand, their trademarks, and to file for or to use the mechanisms available with the players in the field to get content taken down and whatnot, and thereby also help consumers being protected. And that was just, I mean, the start into it, to say that I think the issues nowadays are much broader than what initially DNS abuse was conceived to be.
Thanks, Daniel. And so now we're going to go into some of those examples. It's really hard to hear yourself while you're talking. Some of these concrete examples that show what's happening, the issues, and that there's not simple ways to combat any of this. So one of the hypotheticals that we have come across in this last year, and several of us on the team, I think, have dealt with this in different capacities. Let's say there's a domain name that was registered with a typo of a bank or other financial institution's name. Too many letters, missing a letter, something a little bit off from the brand owner's name. The bad actor sets up a website with the financial institution's name and logo at the top. They show a login portal where you can put your account number and password. And the bad actor contacts people acting as though they're from the financial institution, points to that deceptive website that they were able to register, uses deep fakes to communicate with the target, and over months and weeks, a relationship of trust is formed, and the consumer makes a money transfer to the wrong party without realizing it. If a follow-up call is requested to ensure the transfer is genuine,
the call is accepted at a fraudulent call center. These are not made-up actions. These are things that we've all seen. And if cryptocurrency was used, trying to track that illegal transfer is completely impossible, because someone's own bank doesn't know, the money's not traceable. The consumer tries to get their money back and then blames the trademark owner or the company, the brand owner, for that loss, and comes after them and is complaining about them. And so I think to ask our panelists to weigh in, how have you seen maybe examples similar to this, and what have you done to stop it?
Hi, is this on? Oh, hi. So one of the big issues we have is with one of our classifieds platforms. And so I'm sure many of you shop online, and a lot of the platforms will offer delivery services. And so what we see sometimes is scammers going on and putting fake content on the platform, and then using it to lure people in. And then they send them a branded page where they can insert their credit card information. And of course, there's no product, and the scammer now has the information. And this, of course, is very damaging. People don't trust the platform, but also, more importantly, people are losing money. And as Alexis says, the police don't always. There's nothing really they can do. So, as a brand owner, what do we try and do to try and help the consumers? We try our best to educate them. We warn them. We put various things on our website to say that you should only use our portals to speak to people. But of course, that doesn't always work. We also spend a lot of money trying to conduct, daily domain name monitoring to try and catch anybody that's registering our brands in these websites, so in these domain names, so that we can try and broadcast them as soon as content goes down. So that is some of the things that we see. I don't know about over at you.
Hello? Yes. So another example that we had quite a lot, especially in 2022 and in the build-up to the World Cup, where there would be a lot of job postings online with the FIFA logo, with the logo of the World Cup, offering positions, right? Often targeted at countries like Bangladesh, Nepal, where also a lot of the migrant workers that worked in Qatar came from. and soliciting applications for jobs that didn't exist. These actors had nothing to do with the organization or with any recruitment agencies that were actually working for the company or for the World Cup, and that then not only solicited the information, but to progress the application to pay money. And one could say, and this goes back to I think something we heard during these days a lot, online literacy, right? Especially if you're kind of newer to the internet, you might think, oh, this is just the way it's done, right? And you believe that. While others might say, well, who would really think it works that way? But a lot of people actually did send money. Often these are not large amounts for somebody maybe in a Western country, but $100 to $200 is a lot of money in Bangladesh, for example. Can be a year's salary where people are desperate, like, oh, I'll go work at the... And we dealt with this quite a lot and tried to take down these fraudulent sites as quickly as possible, because the longer they're online, the more harmful they are. And really the main goal and driver was to make sure no people are harmed. Yes, there's a harm to the brand. We get complaints about it, but it doesn't really affect the brand that much. There's no financial loss for the brand owner in a direct way, but there's definitely a financial loss to the consumer. And that is also something that I think as a responsibility of especially big brands, you have to take care of.
And I think one of the reasons that we need this broader definition too is to hold the registrars accountable. So what do you do when there's a website like that? What are the actions? You said taking it down quickly. How fast can it be taken down?
Well, that widely differs, and we're talking about domain name abuse, right? I mean, a lot of this also happens on social media, where typically it's actually faster with a lot of platforms. It depends on the platform, really. But normally then you have as a first option, two options. You go to the host that hosts the content on that website. If it's a compliant host and they know what they're doing and they actually want to play by the rules, you can be successful pretty quickly. If you're really lucky, within hours, such web content is taken down, if you give it enough evidence, etc. Or you go to the registrar, which sometimes are also compliant. But then in some regions of this world, they're not really, and you will fall on deaf ears. And then it becomes really complicated.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, if it falls into a clear phishing attack, if there's a clear fish kit used, if there's a credit card, and you as an organization or brand owner have the mechanisms and the knowledge to understand that is a phishing case, you can go and use sophisticated tools, but these cost money. And I think what is important is for smaller companies that do not have such a budget or do not necessarily even understand the need for these tools, they will not know where to start. So again, I think trying to explain often, even to when we get complaints, the difference between a phishing attack versus a simple infringement attack, or for example the job scams, which we get a lot of complaints where people have handed over very personal information, attended online CVs, sent money, sent credit card informations. Again, it depends on where it is. Is it on a social media? Often they're 3 or 4 dimensional attacks. And so they get very sophisticated. And I think that's the issue, is trying to even, I mean, I've been doing this for so many years now. And even still, these cases that are coming to us now, they're getting so much more sophisticated, and trying to have a look at them and say, well, let's start and see where would we have compliance? Where is it worth spending the resources? Are they using our trademark? Is that something we can do? Is there a fish kit involved? But again, I think it comes down to having the expertise and skills in your team, the resources and the budgets to know which mechanisms to use.
And maybe just to add to that, because Tara just said it, the sophistication of these scams has exploded. I mean, as I said, back in the day when there were scams, it was pretty easy to detect. Often the English on those websites was terrible. You're like, okay, who drafted this? The links were all broken. If you clicked on something, it didn't work. It was often, at least to the sophisticated eye, pretty obvious. Nowadays, with AI, people create websites in minutes, put them up, they look perfect, go down, next one is put up. And I mean, you gave me an example of fish kits. You just said fish kit. Maybe speak to that a little bit, because that's really interesting. That's something that's rather new, but where whole solutions are offered.
Hang on, before we
Yeah.
do that, I do want to tie it back to the idea of how long it takes to get something taken down. So if you have the host who's responsive and sees that there's some infringement, but if there's not copyright infringement, where there's the US DMCA laws that require them to act quickly, if it's just trademark infringement, just a brand name on there, the host might not act, and the registrar might not take it down because they don't know, who's behind it, and the risk of taking something down that's actual real speech, they don't want to have to make that decision. So then you go through the uniform domain name, the UDRP process, everybody knows, and that takes weeks, right? You finally get a complaint together. You have to hire a lawyer typically to put that together. It costs thousands of dollars. You have to file the fee, and then you have to wait, see if the other side responds, which they probably don't because it's bad behavior. They're going to just put this up on another site. And then the website is still up there for weeks until you can get it taken down, and it's continuing to harm people. People are continuing to put money in it or be deceived into thinking it's a real site. And so I think that's tying that back to why there needs to be that broader definition to put the onus on registrars and governments to make new policies to ensure that these kinds of activities can be stopped faster, and that's what we're talking about here with these examples. So I will let Dr. Sameh, who's I think online, chime in a little bit with his experience, and if we can take the PowerPoint slides down and then we can see him, that would be great.
Hello, good afternoon.
We can hear you.
To join this panel. I would like to say to explore the Egypt efforts for especially financial frauds and the DNS abuse. Actually, you have several instances happened in Egypt, especially related to the financial frauds. For example, in 2023, the authorities arrested 29 individuals, including 13 foreigners, involved in a major online fraud operation linked to an app and a mobile application called Hookboard. The group allegedly defrauded over 20 victims and getting around 180 million dollars. The fraudsters were looking for a quick financial gain through the internet. Actually, they use some suspicious activities, including creation of fake wallets, illicit currency transfers. Unfortunately, they use mobile phones, computers, group messaging tools to carry out their scams. Actually, the funds were funneled abroad and converted into untraceable cryptocurrency. In this context, the victims cannot blame the financial institute. This is an example that happened in Egypt in 2023. There is another example of incident happened in Egypt. A number of phishing scam reported where individual fake bank messages. Fraudsters send SMS messages or emails that appear to be from local bank asking people to update their personal information and provide credit card details. This is another phishing scams is already happening. Also, there is fake charity scams, especially in months of Ramadan for Islamic society. Is already collecting donation for non-existent cause. So, in this context, there are, from my point of view, there are two roles. One from the consumer role and the other for the governmental role. For the consumer roles, any consumers discover or get suspicious activity, he should report the incident to the responsible boss. This is for the consumer role. For the government role, actually, first it comes to the government as a cyber incident or a complaint through the hotline or email for IGF on finance or friendship. So to address this, we did a response plan. First, we validate the complaint by confirming the domains is missing and its relation to the regional financial institution. Actually, we use tools like OS or RDRS to gather registrant details. In some cases, if we couldn't get the information, we submit a request to the Uniform Domain Dispute Resolution Policy, UDRA, to reclaim the domain and contact the host to shut down the defective domain or blocking the domain IP. Actually, we have a national project in Egypt. It's called IP Scanner. It scans the national IPs and any suspicious IPs already blocked. And also, if there is a social pages or accounts try to view the scams, it's already blocked in coordination with the Facebook company. Uh, for the prevention plan, actually, we should have a proactive monitoring. Legally, we scan the domain registration similar to brand using online brand protection services or using anti-phishing tools to detect like email filters and antivirus software, authentication tools, authentication solutions for emails like DMARC or SDF or BKM. This is already authentication method just for to prevent spammers, phishers, and other unauthorized parts. Also, we did consumer awareness through a paid awareness campaigns, especially through the social media and also through the TV and radio. So we educate the customers to recognize phishing and the type of scrutiny tactics, share steps to verify phishing financial institution online. Also, we just to advocate leverage AI-based tools to identify which related activities. So we had the three laws, a plan for response plan and prevention plan and the role to the consumer.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Sami. That's very helpful. And I think it also brings up one of the key pieces that government and businesses share the tools. We have the same tools, right? The brand owners, the RDRS. You have to see who's behind it, right? Who's behind this bad activity. For government to take action, it's also impossible for them after the WHOIS information, was taken down to get accurate WHOIS data. So governments rely on that, intellectual property owners rely on that, all to protect consumers. So without that accurate information, it really limits the ability of anyone to figure out who's behind these websites, and get it stopped. I don't know if the two of you have any more insight on that piece.
Yeah, I think in the previous session, also on DNS abuse, I think it may have been a Brazilian regulator. I joined a bit late, but he was also saying that, you know, not everyone needs to have that information, but at least the platforms do, and I think that should extend to DNS providers and registrars and registries as well. They should also have the right information. I don't believe that it should necessarily be published. Of course, that would not be GDPR compliant. But I think that if there was at least some mechanism to have that in place, it would assist, especially when a crime is being committed. Because at the moment, it could be that Mickey Mouse from California owns the domain name, and then when you try and uncover the who is, that's of course hidden. And then when you try and even look for where it's hosted, that's usually hidden as well behind Cloudflare. And so you just hit with constant walls when you're trying to enforce harmful content. And that can be very frustrating when you have customers that are very upset, that are hurt, that have lost money. Similarly, we have HR personnel who are being cloned. And so even our staff are upset because their privacy is being invaded. People are pretending to be them. So yeah, I think certainly from my side, it feels sometimes like multiple walls that block you. And then the normal enforcement mechanisms, if the criminals know what they're doing, are not always effective.
You're very right. And normally in these situations, especially with scams, phishing attacks, time is of the essence, right? I mean, the longer they're perpetrated, the more, the bigger the harm is. And often it takes quite significant amounts of time to deal with it, to find the information, to get behind it, if you can at all, and then hope that the hosts or the registrars you're dealing with are actually compliant and see what you're seeing, right? Or sometimes it's also an issue of internal education of the people dealing with these complaints. You know, investment by the companies in their workforce to deal, because it's not always that easy. And I understand also from their perspective, sometimes it's borderline. Are you going to make that call and take a whole website down that then there might be backlash from the other end, right? That you're inhibiting speech. It's not easy, of course. You know, these are not easy questions often to deal with. But that's why, you know, regulation or clearer rules are important, to give guidelines on how to deal with such situations.
Is there anything? We're going to open this up.
We have one comment from the online participant, Keith Drazik from VeriSign. He just added to the... You're here?
So, thank you. Hi, everybody. My name is Keith Drazik. I'm with VeriSign, the registry operator for .com and .net. Thank you for having this session. It's very important. I'll just paraphrase in my comment, is that under the ICANN's new agreements with registries and registrars, a fish is a fish whether there's IP infringement or not. And ICANN's GTLD registries and registrars, and I'm drawing a distinction between GTLDs and CCTLDs that don't have a contract with ICANN, but the GTLD registries and registrars do. And we, as contracted parties to ICANN, now have an affirmative obligation to mitigate these harms, these online harms, these DNS abuse definitions. Phishing is clearly one of them. And if there are registrars or registries in any region that are ignoring well-evidenced reports of phishing, they should be reported to ICANN, because ICANN now has the tools to hold them to account. And they have said that if registrars continue to ignore well-evidenced reports of phishing, that they will take action and hold them to account, including de-accreditation. And that is an important tool now in ICANN's toolbox that didn't exist before Q1 of this year. So this is a really important conversation, but I wanted to note that ICANN now has the tools that they didn't used to have, and we're expecting ICANN to, you know, basically clean up the industry to the extent needed. Thank you.
Thank you. That's helpful. I do think that sometimes proving that the phishing, I do think that sometimes proving the phishing, that connection, having to give personal information about the consumer was harmed. What do you do? Do you give that email where they said they lost $15,000 with their personal information in it to prove that? So I think that's where it gets a little bit fuzzier. It would be easier if you could just say, my brand name is on that, that's not my site, take it down. But that's definitely an excellent point. And we have a question in the front.
Hi, just to put the counter view. So my name's Nick Wenburn Smith. I'm the General Counsel for Nominet, which is the .uk CCTLD registry. I oversee all of our dispute resolution. I think we have quite a good system. I think it has a good reputation in general terms. And in fact, we do have quite a wide definition under our terms and conditions, which would include any sort of unlawful content. But I just want to sort of just explain, and since we've got the FIFA here, I'll use a football example. So we once had a situation where there was a football manager, quite a famous one, called Alex Ferguson, managed United. He published his autobiography. I guess it was a ghosted autobiography. Anyway, he had the copyright in it, and it was extensively reported when it was published, and including on the BBC's website. And he was pretty cross, and he claimed this was an infringement of his copyright on the BBC. So I just want to say that if you need to be quite careful about creating firm rules, because operators like to follow firm rules. But if you're not too careful about widening the scope to, obviously clear scams would be within scope, but a sort of an arguable copyright infringement, the logical consequence, if that was determined, and maybe it was copyright infringement, right? But the DNS level action in that situation would be quite a severe one, in the sense that the whole of the BBC's website and all of their employees' email addresses would stop working. So I'm just sort of testing the tires in the nicest possible way. The industry generally, certainly the people who participate in these sorts of practices, are very responsible, very responsive, have a very strong self-interest, I guess, in terms of the reputation of their own infrastructure and resources. But you just need to be quite careful about overbroad definitions. That's the point I wanted to make. Thank you, and thank you for having the session. It's very interesting.
Thank you.
Maybe if I may on that point, and I think you make a very good point, because as now being on the side of a service provider, right, we sometimes see where we get from brands, lists of websites that in their minds are infringing, and if you took it just for bare value and you go after them, we would have at one point taken down a major Australian retailer, or at least tried to. So yes, there needs to be scrutiny, and there needs to be, and it's often a fine line. And I totally understand from a registry perspective, you can't take the point of a court. I mean, that's not what you're supposed to do, and I totally get that. Yeah.
I think we have one question over here, and then we'll go back to the examples.
Hi, thank you. Andrew Campling, 419 Consulting and DNS enthusiast. Just a couple of quick points. Firstly, education absolutely helps, pick up one of the points that was said by the panel. But when you've got mixed alphabets of, say, Latin and Cyrillic letters, even if you're actively looking, it's really difficult to spot it. So maybe others need to think about whether we should not allow mixed alphabets in domain names. But then just two brief points. One is informational point. The speed of exploitation. There's research from earlier this year which says the sites are created and exploited within an hour, and if you don't act within 24 hours, they're no longer interested. They've stopped using them, they're on to the next one. So it's, you have minutes before the exploits begin. It's quite scary. And then, the second point, which is, building on what's been done already, let's build some more friction into the system. So know your customer is tremendously valuable here. If a domain isn't linked to a real person or a legal entity, mark the reputation down on the threat feeds. Then it's hard to access the system for many internet users. Then it becomes a lot less useful. So it raises good behavior. Those sites are more valuable, and penalizes the registrars that are allowing these bad practices. So, build on the good practice of ICANN and Nominet and others, and make the bad actors less successful.
You spoiled our punchline. I'm just kidding. Get the know your customer idea. I think we'll get to that too, because I think that's a good threshold.
Alexis, just if you allow me to answer one very important question he mentioned about the other languages, internationalized domain names, what we call sometimes. We were part from the beginning when they start, for example, some of this, and at the same time, I was part in the Arabic, for example, script, and we banned some characters, which sometimes looks a little bit different or similar to each other. I expect the other languages did something similar. For example, not allowed to say in French the accent without something or something like this. So I think it's yes, but I agree with you. It needs more technical solutions. And to a dominant comment, if you allow me, I like that .uk since long time is one of the best, of course, in handling everything. So I know that many CCTLDs, INTA, for example, did something recently in the UAE, and the .ie now follows some kind of similar to UDRP to try to help these DNS abuses and so on. Just wanted to share this with you. Thank you.
Discussing the other day, the short form that .uk has, that's much simpler and easier to get things taken down. So definitely a leader. And I think we were also discussing recently that the NIS2 regulations coming into force in the EU or being adopted will also have an impact on understanding who's behind domain names and having more veracity behind who's registering these and getting them stopped. Were there other examples? I think we were talking yesterday too, to just get back into the examples a little bit, to keep hitting at, it's not just phishing or financial fraud. We were talking about the products last night. And if you could just mention that, the average consumer, being online, how does this affect them too?
Okay, yes. About counterfeits. I recently got asked by one of our platforms. We have multiple platforms. We have B2C, but we also have classifieds where we've got consumer. But on one of our platforms, we got some really bad press on one of the journalistic shows, saying that we're the place for counterfeits. And of course, the business was very upset. They had a sort of trademark program, a bit like the Amazon program. It's only relevant for African trademarks, being that that's their market. And it turned out that there was a anti-choking device that was being sold, and it was a counterfeit. And of course, we did not know that. And the consumer, when they bought the product, realized. But the good thing in this situation was it was on our platform, so we could immediately ban the seller, take appropriate legal action. But what we were talking about is the example of this. Whilst it is a small device, it's an anti-choking device. This is not something you want a counterfeit. And if this was being sold on domain names, for example, this could be very dangerous. And given that this counterfeit product in circulation, it's obviously being sold in many places. So in my view, that's an example of quite a dangerous product. I mean, we've spoken about baby car seats, we've heard of baby formula, and all sorts of things that could really have a sort of life or death, could be really dangerous.
And I think the hook there too is that it's so much, and we talked about it before with AI, and I've seen this explode in the last year. Like, my desk has gotten a lot busier with these kinds of issues, because it's gotten a lot easier to put up websites that look like a real website selling this anti-choking device, and people think this must be authentic, this must be real, let me go in here and put an order in, and nothing ever comes, or they get something that doesn't work. So it's so much easier to pretend to be real. And Daniel touched on that earlier also. Daniel, I don't know if you have more examples of those kinds of issues with domain names.
I mean, what you also sometimes see where it's also smaller companies, right? Where then it gets more difficult because they might not even have trademark protection. They're up and coming startups, but that get, quite prominent or successful in their small area, in their region only, but haven't even gotten to that point yet. And then if you don't have a trademark, then it gets more difficult to take action. And I mean, we had a case with an asset manager that just never thought about it really. They didn't need it. They were like, well, I only work in a small area, but somehow their site got cloned. Wasn't a one-to-one, but their address was on there, their information, and instead of being able to buy whatever financial products they were offering, it related to crypto. And it just had wallet addresses. They were like, oh, you want to now invest with us here? Just send it to us. I mean, if you do that, your money's gone. As simple as that, right? And in that situation, we were just lucky that the host that was hosting the site was very compliant and understood very quickly, yeah, we see it, this is a scam, took it down, was over. But, you know, maybe the infringer there wasn't even that smart because they used a compliant host. Often the infringers know what they're doing. You know, the scammers know that they go to hosts where it will take a while for things to disappear online. So, you know, it happens every day, and I think it can happen to anyone. I mean, often the scams are so sophisticated that we might be duped.
Well, yeah, but I was also thinking about, you know, some of the discussions we've had, and I'd welcome the audience's participation in inclusion and digital literacy, and, you know, more people getting online and having access to the internet and not understanding, you know, what's real and what's fake. You know, there's these products. There's also, you know, services, fake tech support, fake customer service attack. You know, attackers might impersonate the customer service portals of legitimate companies. You know, I'm not going to name any because I don't have any examples, but, you know, you think of the biggest tech companies you could think of, and someone, you know, mistypes their name in. And, you know, they have a fake chat service, fake phone numbers. Someone might contact these consumers thinking, you know, and you're new to the internet. Think if you never, you know, saw this before and you're like, oh, I know, I've heard of that big tech company. Maybe I'm online. This must be their tech support helping me with my new email account or something like that. And pretending to be these agents, the victim's tricked into giving remote access on their device or paying for services that aren't needed. You know, malware, of course, is covered by the new definition at ICANN. But, you know, there's things that are not so bad as phishing or malware, but it's still bad and it's still harming consumers. And so I guess, have you guys had, taking it from the counterfeit piece really to the services piece where it's not as tangible, right? It's not as, here's the evidence of this, you know, financial harm, but also hurts the brand owner who the customers now think, you know, this is what's going on here? You know, they've taken my information. So Tara, can you weigh in on that?
I think one of the big problems we have at the moment, Daniel also meant them, we've got two types of scams: investment scams and job scams. And job scams, I think, really, you know, people talk about fundamental human rights, and the right to work is one of them. And so people are desperate, right? And what happens? These scammers tend to advertise these remote jobs with our company, and they really, you know, targeting vulnerable people that are desperate, that are looking for money, and then they make them apply for the jobs. They get all their personal information, and you know, I spoke to an external lawyer about this, and he said that some of his big clients have the person has been tricked and they've actually gone on a plane, and so this almost becomes a sort of human trafficking issue. Thank this has not happened to us, but you can see how easily this could happen. Someone who's desperate and say, well, I've got this offer and I'm getting some money, because they do start paying in the beginning. They only hook you in a little bit later. The other one is, of course, investment scams. And we had, you know, whilst we're a public listed company, you know, you have to go to your broker and buy the stocks. We don't sell them. And what we found were people were going offline, first of all, and going into retirement homes and other sort of places where very vulnerable people were, and then showing them all these ways that they can invest with us, and then bringing them back to websites that either look like ours to try and get information to either get hold of their own shares. So these are the kind of things we see where vulnerable people are targeted.
That's perfect. And I think developing those kinds of, you know, secure, standardized access mechanisms for, you know, entities like yours and others to get the information as to who's behind this and how do we stop it, it needs to be more clear and it needs to be more accessible. Daniel, did you have more the services, and I don't want to ignore people online if there's anything going online.
Maybe one final thing is that what we've seen quite a lot in the past is impersonation issues, where CEOs of big companies, etc., their identities are stolen in that sense and used again for scams, mostly investment stuff. And it's not about quenching criticism of a company often. They're really used, the personas are used to drive certain behaviors from consumers that are harmful for them. And I think that's quite a big topic at the moment with a lot of companies, that impersonation has excelled, but to be honest, mostly on social media rather than, from my experience, rather than on websites. But it's definitely a field that is being watched right now. And then you have the whole deepfake issue, that personas are created, interviews are being put out there on websites, etc., that are just made up.
Right. And the way that ties back into, rather than moderating content, but tying back to that idea of being able to put up these websites at domain names that look legitimate, right, with the deep fakes, or even, I'm thinking of websites that you can put up with technology that's available now. You can put up websites that aren't, that have photos on them or things like that aren't even copyright infringement, right? You can't take it down through a host because the photo isn't real, because AI made it and it was an amalgamation of numerous photos. And so, those kinds of issues that have just gotten more sophisticated and make it, really necessary for, more policing and more effective, I think, abilities to take action online. I don't know if Dr. Sameh, if you had any more examples or thoughts on what was being said here this afternoon. Is he unmuted? Oops, sorry, we had technical issues. If anyone in the room has any examples of this or dealt with this in their own region, we'd really be interested in hearing about it, because I think it's not just a U.S., or European issue. Oh, just
Hello?
a second. Oh, yep, there you are.
Sorry
Thank you.
again. Sorry, I just trying to say to stop, but you interrupt me. Uh, we have similar issues. I agree with my colleagues about what you said. The key concern for, especially for big stores and job scams and personalization, is, for example, for big stores or counterfeit goods, actually damage the customer trust and compromise their safety and undermine the legitimate business. So actually, we should consider again, as my colleague said, you have to enhance the consumer awareness. And you have to educate the consumers, and verifying their authenticity through official channels and avoiding the unofficial marketplace. Also, there is a need for cross-sector collaboration. We need to encourage a collaboration between brands and the governments and the platforms to detect and act against counterfeit activities. Actually, we need also to strengthen intellectual property laws. Actually, we have an issue in Egypt happened in July 2024. Uh, Actually, suddenly it appears fake Apple stores in Egypt. So the Apple Inc. filed a lawsuit against the stores in Egypt using its logo and selling counterfeit products. So actually, and Egypt already have a legislation for that, for the intellectual property rights, law number 282 for 2002. So actually, it is already protected the Apple stores already, we already did actions against the fake stores. Also, we have the same in Egypt for the medicines, especially for the fake medicines. there is some social media and Facebook accounts selling out of dated medicines and fake medicines as well. But actually, we already the government again the government did announcements for establishment Egypt's own drug authority, just to come at a good time to stop the cases of fake drugs in the country. So the legal frameworks already is necessary, and the education and educate the consumers just to take care about most of the scams. So in addition for the third one is the technology driven solution. We have to leverage the blockchain and AI based, especially as my colleague said, the deepfake. We have to use new techniques and the AI just to discover any malicious activity. Thank you.
Thank you. I think those are excellent points, and the idea of the fake drugs brought me to another example in medicine, and we talked about this a lot in our committee as we were preparing for this presentation. There are people that are part of pharmaceutical companies, and I've had issues on behalf of pharmaceutical companies where the website, again, looks like a good website and it's selling steroids or, drugs that are very harmful. And do you wait and do a fake purchase to see if if it's an actual site, or do you just get it taken down? And these are regulated companies, right? The pharmaceutical companies are regulated companies. They are worried about these products. They do not want consumers to be harmed. They don't want people taking these. They want these down quickly. And so doing a whole, UDRP proceeding again, which turned out to be the only option in one of our examples, it takes a long time and someone could be hurt in the process. So I think that's, what all of these different examples go to, but I think we have another comment from the audience.
Thank you. So thanks again. Keith Drazik with VeriSign. Again, I typed into chat, but I'll just paraphrase. As we refer to domain names throughout this conversation, I think it's really important to recognize the distinction between domains that have been registered with the purpose of and the exclusive use to perpetrate or propagate harm, right? DNS abuse, phishing, farming, malware, botnet, command and control, whatever it may be. That in the instance where there's a domain that is being registered and used exclusively for that purpose, then absolutely the registry is in the most appropriate position to deal with that, because you take the domain name down, everything associated with that domain name is being used or intentionally used for harm, then that's appropriate. However, if you're talking about a compromised website where a perfectly legitimate website has been hacked and malware is being distributed, or a portion of that website is being used for phishing or for illegal activity, then the most appropriate actor in that case is the web host, because they're able to, in a very targeted way, deal with that bit of harm on the website or in that hosting platform. Whereas if you were to take the domain name down in that case, everything associated with that domain name would be negatively and disproportionately impacted. Email was an example that was used, right? And so I think as we in the registry and registrar in the DNS space think about it, the distinction between a maliciously registered name or a name that's been registered for exclusive malicious use versus the compromised website is just an important distinction, and that really points you to who the most appropriate actor is when it comes to the mitigation. Thanks.
Thank you. That's an excellent point. So we're up on time. I think we have one more. We can, go ahead. Charles.
Is it okay? Okay, thank you very much. Thank you for giving me this opportunity to share the experience of the .cm CCTLD on those issues. We have included in our .cm charter some measures to mitigate the case of misuse of domain names. And when we are informed of an abusive use of domain name, and when we have enough evidence, we just suspend the name, and I think that it can be a very good way of dealing with this kind of problem. So thank you very much. .cm is .cameroon domain
Thank
name.
you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for that. Excellent. Well, now that we're done on time, is there anybody else over here? Great. Well, oh, go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you. Can you hear me? Okay. My name is Thuy. I'm from .vn, and I just thank you for giving the time. And I would like to have a question that for .vn, for example, for abuse the domain name, we suspend and we can come to delete at the college from. Have a church there, but I would like to ask ICANN and registry and register lies verify. As you share, ICANN and registrar apply the how to say many way to shut down the domain, but by our observation, there are still quite a lot website using in Vietnam that that is a fake website. Even they fake even the governmental website. So can you have for us in such situation what the best method to shut them down? Thank you.
I think you're welcome. I don't know if you guys want to weigh in on that, but I think that's the very issue here is what is the best way. Sorry, no, you're just putting your headset on. What is the best way to shut down testing a website that isn't a .vm or a .country code domain name? And that is what we were talking about here today. Really, is the .coms and the .sites .everything else. I think it happens less on the country domain name issues. So, the processes that we discussed is, contacting the registrar, contacting the hosts, or using a UDRP or other mechanism for transferring the domain names. I don't know if you guys have more to add on that piece, but I know we're coming up on time, so I think, we'll put our takeaways together, but thank you everyone for joining us and for this opportunity.